Welcome and thank you for joining us for the Refinitiv Perspectives Live 24-hour special. So we've made it to episode 19, and here we have joining us is Jharonne Martis, who is a Director of Consumer Research at Refinitiv. And today we are going to be talking about retail and e-commerce. So nice to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So we'll get right into it. But with the closure, obviously, in 2020, everything kind of shut down. So with the closures of many economies, how has this had an impact on the high street in 2020 and how in retail businesses?
So it's definitely accelerated, a trend that we've already been seeing happening in the retail space in two different ways. One of them being that the companies who were already struggling before the pandemic were struggling even further. To be specific, these are the department and apparel stores because they had been out of favor for some time right now with the U.S. consumer. Their merchandise is just not as appealing, especially mall stores. Malls have been out of favor. The traffic there has been weak. So as a result, because of the pandemic and the store closures, then those stores hurt it more, and a lot of them have gone out of business or have filed for bankruptcy. On the other hand, we've seen that more and more consumers are spending more money online, and this trend definitely accelerated in the pandemic as everybody was forced to shop online in order to have a fast and contactless way of shopping. And as a result, e-commerce has really grown, jumped from to 15% in 2020, and this is expected to continue to grow even further in 2021. This is from an initial only 4% back in 2010. So this gives you an idea how much it's grown over the last decade. The amount that people are spending online will continue, this trend will continue into 2021, as Americans are telling us in a recent survey with Marrow Blue Public Opinion that Refinitiv discovered that Americans do intend to continue to shop online even as the vaccine has become available and after COVID, especially because they are still planning to work at home. The working from home trend will still continue, and they are hoping to still avoid large crowds. So as a result, we're seeing that that trend will continue at least until even after COVID.
So you talk a lot about retailers having to go online, grow their e-commerce. Were there any standout retailers that really handled this transition to e-commerce well?
So the ones that handle it very well were the ones that had been investing in a very strong omni-channel presence for some time now. In fact, I remember about 2-3 years ago, Target and Home Depot will constantly beat on earnings when they reported their earnings, the quarterly earnings. And even though they would beat on earnings, they would say, for example, but we're going to be investing heavily on our omni-channel experience, and then the stock would immediately take a hit because of these words, because of the heavy investments. These investments are not cheap, but it's a necessary evil for their survival. These investments paid off during the pandemic, and it's what put a lot of these retailers, in a position of strength because of that. In addition to those retailers that have invested, obviously consumers' houses have been turned into gyms, schools, restaurants. And as a result, we're seeing that consumers are investing in the stay-at-home experience. There's been an uptick of do-it-yourself projects because consumers are finally home and they have the time to fix things. So as a result, we're seeing that the home improvement like Home Depot, Lowe's continue to do well. Even Williams-Sonoma and Bed Bath & Beyond, as consumers are organizing their households. Yeah. And then, of course, health and wellness has been a top priority for them. So as a result, Athleisure did well, and it's expected to continue to do well. We saw Peloton, Lululemon with the purchase of Mirror. And then when we look at the Refinitiv forecast, analysts continue to be very bullish on Nike, Lululemon. The Starmine model suggests that Dick's Sporting Goods, Hibbets, and Vista Outdoors are all expected to continue to do well in 2021, as consumers still will be working out and buying these items.
Yeah, and some recent research saw that gift cards were also among one of the most purchased items this holiday season. Can you go into the thinking behind this?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's funny because the government just released the latest reading last week for December retail sales, and those
Mhm.
numbers actually fell from previous months. But the reason they fell was because gift cards actually don't get recorded when they're initially purchased, but
Wow.
rather when consumers redeem them. And consumers are notorious for keeping these in their wallets for months. The gift cards were the
Yes.
number one gifts during the holiday season for both the US and Canada. And this is because it's very, well, for various reasons. The US shopper is usually traditionally loves to procrastinate, and it's an easy one click away gift, and it gets immediately into the recipient's inbox. And the other thing too is that since consumers did go and purchase these in the month of December, those revenues actually will not get reported in the month of December, but rather will show up later as the year progresses, as some consumers might actually even hold off on spending it until the malls reopen. It's also proven that once consumers redeem gift cards, they tend to spend even more than the value of the gift card. So this will also be giving a boost to retailers. So as a result, when we look at our forecast, our outlook, the Refinitiv earnings do suggest that the first quarter will be the first positive one for retailers in terms of earnings growth. And then as things start to reopen, vaccines are more accessible, we can continue to see them spend a little bit more freely.
Yeah, and something that might help spending a little more freely is how will the incoming stimulus checks impact 2021? What have you seen in the way people are planning to spend them?
Well, initially they're telling us that they are gonna be saving some of the money. They will also be paying off debt, and then 20% of it will be spent. That's what the initial survey shows. And this is mainly because we're still in a pandemic. So
Mhm.
even in the last recession that we had, the Great Recession, we saw that savings rates spiked, which is what happened in mid 2020 last year. It has come down since then, but it's still very high levels. And the reasoning behind this is because of the unemployment number. That's the one
Mhm.
economic indicator that consumers understand very well, because when there's a slowdown in the economy, the unemployment rate goes up, which means that every consumer pretty much has a friend or relative that has lost their jobs. And then in fear of themselves losing their job, they start to save for an emergency fund or for a rainy day. So as a result, right now, because we're still in the pandemic, the bulk of the consumers are telling us that they will be saving it and building their emergency fund. They will be paying off debt, and then a portion of it will be spending it. Now, what's interesting is when those that intend to spend it do intend to spend it not only on rent and groceries and the main bills for those who are
Mhm.
unemployed, but for those who are employed and will be receiving the check, the main focus is still home renovations. They are still investing their money in improving the stay-at-home experience. As you know, as the times are still uncertain, we don't know for how much longer they will have to be at home.
Yeah, and on the note of stimulus checks, do you think, we keep saying it's Inauguration Day, we kind of have to bring it up every time. Do you think that this will have an impact at all on how consumers are spending in the future?
Well, it's very so in terms of the things that are affecting consumer right now is it's a brand new year, and therefore
Mhm.
they're feeling more optimistic. So we started off the year with stronger consumer sentiment, and this is mainly because it's a brand new year, a brand new, like you mentioned, the inauguration dates. It marks the beginning of a new start for the government, and it's also vaccines have become widely more accessible, and then also the stimulus checks are coming into their wallet. So as a result, consumers started off this week a little bit more upbeat when we released
Mhm.
a report of consumer sentiment. This bodes well as we continue to see the unemployment rate come down. Then we're going to continue to see consumers spend more freely. The unemployment rate and has a strong correlation with consumer spending. So if that number
Mhm.
starts to come down and consumers start to see their relatives and friends are starting to gain employment again, then they're going to feel more confident about spending their money.
So this is kind of similar, but what would you say the overall outlook for 2021 is? Would it be safe to say that 2021 will only see the growth of online retail, given the recent distancing sentiment data research, or can we maybe see it going back to in-store?
So it's interesting because the retailers that are on the other side of the world and, are on the other side of the pandemic in Asia, for example, they're telling us that traffics have in the store have come back to normal levels from pre-pandemic era. But even though the consumers are coming into the store, they are still gravitating online to finalize those purchases. So that means that they're coming into the store to eye the merchandise, to see it in their hands before they actually purchase, but they're still going online to do that purchase for one reason or another, whether it be to do some price research, or maybe they feel more secure or have it just delivered to their house directly. The consumer now is accustomed to having a fast and efficient way of shopping, and that's why having a strong omni-channel presence is very critical for a retailer, whether it be that the consumer is in the store and wants to order it right then and have it shipped to their house, or on its way to work, order it through the mobile and then pick it up on its way to the house. Consumer just wants to have it in the most efficient way possible. They want to be able to shop and have those items delivered. So as a result, those retailers were a strong omni-channel presence. One in particular that has done very well is Nike, both in Asia and the United States. Those are still projected to continue to do very well. And so, again, the omnichannel strategy is critical. The brick and mortar stores is still very much so necessary, because even though e-commerce is growing as a percentage of retail sales, still about 85% of total retail spending still happens in store. So therefore, it is still critical.
Well, it's going to be so interesting to see how this year pans out in the world of e-commerce and retail, seeing if we kind of go back to shopping in store, if we keep to this e-commerce shopping. So it's been so great to have you, Jharonne. We really appreciate hearing your insights.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, you can read a recent article written by Jharonne on the stimulus injection to the U.S. by scanning the code or clicking the link on the screen now. As always, thank you for joining us, and be sure to stay tuned for the next episode on the hour, Diversity and Inclusion. See you next hour.